Tough lift. Welcome to From the Horse's Mouth. So this is going to be my weekly little YouTube show where I try to bring up a topic where we're going to debate it, talk about it, but we're going to try to bring in basically the best info literature that's out there, which is kind of where I came up with From the Horse's Mouth, besides it being what I think very clever play on the farm. But from the horse's mouth, old idiom that basically just means from the expert's point of view. I'm not necessarily the expert. We're trying to go out to the people that we're affiliated with, colleagues, coaches, whoever it might be, bring ideas together and then present this on this show. So that's what the idea for today's show actually came from a post from a friend of ours, Dr. John Dunbar up near Baltimore, Maryland, put a post up on kind of neck position in the deadlift. So there's a T-Nation article out there that's I think titled something along the lines of the unknown debate with deadlifting technique, and it talks a lot about this. We're going to bring up some points in that. So we're actually going to head into our small office here and take a look at some things on the computer. So Sloan's going to follow me in here. I guess I should gallop, shouldn't I? Yeah. So up here on the computer, if Sloan can kind of just show our friend John here what he's showing. And by the way, follow John. First Move Performance Health, great physician. So in the first picture, John is showing deadlift setup with basically a hinged cervical extension position. Setup 2, John is in deep neck flexion, which gives him cervicothoracic, upper thoracic extension, and also cervical extension, just not unisegmental, multi-segmental. And we're also going to talk about what that's going to also kind of add to the soup or the recipe of a proper deadlift. Now, I'm not saying that the A picture here, the first picture with John, is necessarily wrong. We're just debating a little bit, trying to kind of stir the pot, and we want some good debate out of this. So we want some good comments. We want to spur people to go out there and to look into this further. But I don't want any trolls. If I think you're a troll, I'm going to kick you off, okay? But we're not saying it's wrong, but what I also heard is that if you do it with this hinged neck, that something like this could happen. Can you zoom in here, Sloan? I heard this can happen. I don't know if this is true or not. And she's super excited about the cervical hinge that's going to happen. Look up, I'm driving up. Oh my God, oh my goodness. She was so sick of herself because of this poor form with her neck, she blew chunks. So, yeah, I heard that can happen. Well, let's come back out here so we got more room to play around. So the first thing we need to talk about with this is everybody's debating, should there be cervical extension in the deadlift? And I think if you listen to what I just said in there, absolutely, but it's how we go about it. So what I was talking about with John, when John gets into a setup, we can see he had a hinge. You can literally almost draw a line across the segment of a cervical spine that's getting the most motion, versus a deep neck flex position, which is a very stable position for not just the neck, but sets the core up and actually the rest of the body up for kind of a prime position for a deadlift or any kind of posterior chain exercise, triple flexion to triple extension type move like that. Now, in that T-Nation article, they talk about why we may want to have head up or chin up cue. One of the reasons they talk about is being able to facilitate the muscles in the posterior chain, specifically like lower trap, part of the lumbar erectors. My kind of little sarcastic quip to that is, I guess if that's the case, we should just start cutting holes in the bench on a leg press so we can lay in a leg press like this, get our hair washed while we do leg press, which is just so functional, we might as well add a salon in there as well, because it's just an awesome move, right? But that's what we're arguing here, that if I go chin up, that the best power lifters, best deadlifters in the world are then able to engage better through part of the posterior chain. Well, if you look at kind of how the body works from a neurologic biomechanics standpoint, if I go into hard cervical extension, I'm also going to usually tend to fall into really hard lumbar extension. Now when that happens, we may see that those lumbar erectors, when we come into the pull position, if we don't have a really good balance front to back, which what did we just talk about, as we open up this, we detract from kind of that anti-extension ability to resist extension there. Now we may get that breaking point later in the lift, especially under heavy load. Now when we're talking about kind of heavy load, maybe max deadlift, we want to point out that we see a lot of deadlifters that are pulling a lot of weight when we get up in the 600, 700, 800 pound lifts, where they are a bit flexed even from the pull from the start. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what they're not doing is moving under load. So there's no micro movement occurring. When they lock into that position, whether it's completely neutral, a bit flexed, they stay there throughout the whole movement. So now that buttress front to back has been created, it stays solid, and now I don't get that segmental motion under really compressive load. Okay? So the elephant in the room with this is, where's the research at that deep neck, or sorry, a closed pack position of the neck is the best thing for a deadlift? There isn't any that we can find. There's a lot of research on closed pack position of the neck, deep stabilizing system, how the two play off each other, how we can load the diaphragm, transfer that to the muscles on the front of the spine like the longus colli that help us get here to feed upper thoracic extension. Now, the fact that there's no research doesn't mean that it's right or wrong. All that means is that as of right now, what I'm trying to present today is this is the best way that we think we can coach a deadlift to make sure that there is no cervical spine injury. Try to offset that. If there is an injury, it's absolutely the best way to avoid further injury, whether it's a kettlebell swing, a deadlift, anything in a triple flex position. But we're also wanting people to maybe look into it further. People that have the capability to do some research, gather a large group of athletes, and have them perform these different ways and see what is the injury rate if we go into hard extension versus deep neck flexed. Are we able to pull more weight one way or the other? I don't think those questions can really be answered, and the only people that are really saying that it's this way or this way, and the people that are saying that hard cervical extension, that's the way, are usually people that it's still just anecdotal. Well, they say, this guy was a world champ, this is the way he did it, he pulled, a truck. Well, who cares? It may come down to a performance versus longevity thing. So I'm not debating that you can't pull 800 pounds like this, but I bet that you can pull 800 pounds a lot more times without injury in a neutral position where we're still getting cervical extension. Remember, we're not debating the extension, we're debating how are we getting it. Okay? So, that how are we getting that upper thoracic extension is a big deal. And we'll have a video coming out on our YouTube channel going through kind of our ripple system, which is the way that we kind of work on mobility, to show how to help kind of facilitate this deep neck flexion, upper thoracic extension. But what I would argue, and what was brought up in this T-Nation article is, again, if I go into extension, I facilitate the posterior chain, which helps turn those muscles on. Well, if I don't have the ability to get into this position to create extension up here, which a lot of us don't because of our really crappy posture throughout the day, then there's no way I'm going to be functionally strong in that position, so you bet your ass you're going to break down. So this is where the prerequisite training for the extension and then functional strength and endurance in those positions is going to bleed over into a deadlift. And I hope I'm really making that point clear. Again, we're not arguing right or wrong, we're trying to present what we think is the best at the current level of knowledge. Now, let's go into a little bit of the finer details here. So, if I get into my deadlift position, closed pack position of the neck, I'm starting to see this minor curve. Like if you've ever seen a baby on their stomach and they start to look up, they don't hinge. They have this nice curve where each segment's sharing that load. What happens is when I'm in triple flexion, if you look, just Google image, powerlifting champion, you're going to see a lot of neutral neck and not a lot of hinging with a gaze at about 45 degrees in setup. What changes on the pull position is not necessarily the neck, the eyes. So neurologically, this is an extension movement. Our eyes should be looking up, so we want to turn our forehead into a Sharp A, and we want to drive with the eyes, not necessarily the entire head. Okay? So if I use that neurology, I'm still getting the facilitation of the posterior chain, but what I'm not getting is a giant hinge. What I think is kind of funny is, if I was coaching a deadlift and somebody went through the eccentric load or the down load of a deadlift and they had a hinge occur in their lumbar spine during the movement, you would have coaches flying off the bench. Stop, don't do that, we got to fix that. What's going on? Is it a strength issue? Is it a technique issue? But all of a sudden, when we go into the pull, we get a big old hinge in the cervical spine. La-di frickin' da, that's the way it's supposed to be done, right? I don't think so. So we also have a previous video out there on the closed pack position of the neck in a hip hinge movement. So it kind of talks a little bit more about this stuff in detail. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of stuff today. I know I've kind of stirred the pot, maybe kicked a hornet's nest, and that's a good thing. These videos that are coming out with my buddy here, we're yet to name him, so if you got a name idea, put it in the comments here. These are supposed to bring up good debate. We don't want trolls. We want people that are willing to help figure out what is the best way, not say, this dogmatic approach to this is the way it's done, we've been doing it for years. That's not getting us anywhere. And I am the first person to admit that if I am wrong, I'm going to find somebody that's smarter than me to figure out why I'm wrong and how to do it right. Okay? So if you want to reach me to talk about this, or you have any ideas for upcoming From the Horse's Mouth episodes, you can email me, personal email, drbeaubeard@gmail.com, @drbeaubeard on Instagram, Twitter, find me on Facebook, or you can go to our website, chirofarm.com. We'll see you guys next time.